And so I kind of grew up with like, if you're not sleeping with your boyfriend, you're a weirdo. I'm sleeping around, having all these like frivolous relationships, and then I'm upset when the guy I'm sleeping with doesn't want me to be his girlfriend. The law of attraction, which I totally believe in, is like I'm acting in a way that's not attracting a man of standards and morals. And that's why I love, my favorite verse is, he who finds a wife finds a good thing. In order for him to find you, like, you have to already be behaving like a wife.
Well, I believe this is the first time that I am welcoming someone that I first got to do their podcast. So Nicole, thank you for coming back to talk with me. I guess it must have gone okay the first time around.
Yes. It went so good. I'm so honored to be here.
We talked on so much in kind of similar space around dating and marriage and just the seasons of new and dreaming into what God's put on your heart.
Mm-hmm.
But in a very different aspect, still similar, we're going to be talking today around purity. And, you know, that's one of those words where I think some people, their mind just went, womp womp.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's, you know, cookie cutter or it's crunchy. But I really think it's not actually talked about enough in a vein that feels, one, approachable, which I love your testimony. And so glad we're going to get into that, because I think it sheds a new light on the topic. But then also it feels, it can feel mundane when it's actually something that I think we need to walk open-handed into. Like for me, I remember being in singleness, just thinking purity was this unattainable standard. And if I ignored it or like, you know, raised my nose at it, then I could feel okay about missing that mark, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I actually leaned into it and saw the grace that's surrounded purity and the why behind it, I think it became not only something that I wanted to search out more, but I felt this permission to turn me into. So that's my hope today, is that we can have a conversation, you know, starting with how you've approached it, what God's put on your heart for purity. But also for those of you that are listening, feel that similar vein of like, okay, I want to talk about this. I want to journey into it because it's a beautiful gift, not just expectation, but a stewardship. So I say all that to say, you shared a beautiful post around purity, specifically around your husband and you waiting. So I would love to give you the floor to share a little bit of that with our listeners, of what led you or how you viewed purity, and what God showed you around that specifically.
Gosh, there's like so much I could like dive into there, and it really is such a long story. So I'll kind of give the good Cliff Notes version. But basically, I didn't grow up in church. I got saved when I was 27. I'm 32 now. So honestly, not that long ago, it feels like. And, you know, so I kind of have this beauty, I call it like the beauty of like living in the world and then seeing the difference of living for God. And so I do feel like God has called me on this subject of purity, because in today's day and age, gosh, like everything is so sexualized, like the culture of like in movies, on, you know, on TV, what we're seeing on social media, like how women and men are like portraying like their bodies so freely on these platforms, and like everything is just so over sexualized. And coming from that world, like it really is like in like the pre-saved Jesus me, like it really is so normal. Like that like view of like sex and all that is just so normal. Like you don't really think twice about it. And so I kind of grew up with like, if you're not sleeping with your boyfriend, like you're a weirdo, like there's something wrong with you. Like the topic of conversation on like the school bus when you're like 14, 15 is like, oh my gosh, have you given a you know what yet, or this or that? And it was just like so normal. And if you weren't talking about it, it was like weird. Like you're like you're a prude. Like to be a prude was like the worst thing you could be in junior high and high school. And so I kind of grew up with that. It's like in the movies where I'm 15, I'm dating this guy, and I know tonight my parents are out of town, and like I'm gonna lose my virginity tonight. Like I specifically remember that like moment and feeling. And gosh, it wasn't until I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and then I moved to LA when I was 26, the end of 2016 in November, and then January, so only a couple months later is when I got saved. And it was around then where I got, pretty involved in the church right away because I was so attracted to the community there, the way they led their lives, their just the way they carried themselves. And I started surrounding myself with, people in the church who were in healthy relationships. And I grew up in a toxic home. My parents just fighting, threatening divorce 24/7, like super toxic. And so because that was my normal, being treated like that was normal to me too. So I always had very toxic boyfriends, like super verbally abusive, that whole thing. And then in college, like giving my body away to literally anyone and everyone, because that was literally the norm. Like you go out to the bar, you get drunk, you have a one night stand, and then we just laugh and talk about it the next day. But I had this deep, there was something inside of me that was so broken, and I had no idea what it was. Like I didn't know God. I knew that it was something that I couldn't describe to anyone. And then fast forward again, moved to LA, get saved, and then started surrounding myself with all these, I guess you would say, healthy couples. And I'd never seen that before, not from friends' parents, my parents, aunts, uncles, like really no one. And so,
Can I ask you a question on that right there? I think
yeah,
touch is so important to note on that you were doing all those things in a world that felt very normal and that idea, but you still felt that brokenness.
Yeah.
Inside. I'm sure, like you said at the time, you didn't know anything different. So you wouldn't say, oh, well, this is because I did this and that. So how did that come up in your soul, if you will? Like what did that feel like? Because you say you have the one night stand, then you go laugh about it the next day. Like, you kind of like faking or masking the pain when we're in those situations?
Yeah, because I truly believe everyone I truly believe at their core craves a deep, unconditional, healthy love. Like everyone craves that. And so, yeah, I'm sleeping around, having all these like frivolous relationships. And then I'm upset when the guy I'm sleeping with doesn't want me to be his girlfriend. He chooses someone else. And then in my mind, I'm like, well, I feel like I'm doing everything right. Like, why is he not picking me? Like, what's wrong with me? And so, yeah, like I'm laughing about it with my friends, having a good time. But when I go lay down in bed at night, I'm like, well, why are none of these guys picking me? And so I really had to come to this conclusion of yeah, like the guys weren't great, but it's the law of attraction, which I totally believe in, is like I'm acting in a way that's not attracting a man of standards and morals and like all these things. And that's why I love my favorite verse is he who finds a wife finds a good thing. Like he who finds a wife, in order for him to find you, like you have to already be behaving like a wife. Like what is a wife? She's gentle. She's has a good spirit. She's modest in many different ways. And so I really had to check myself, like, okay, I'm going out to the bar wearing shirts cut down to my belly button. Like, is that how a wife would dress? Like, no, I'm going to attract the guy that wants to sleep with me. I'm not going to attract the guy that wants to put a ring on my finger as I'm behaving like this. And so I really had to take a step back and do like inner work. And I didn't know what that looked like until it got to the point of, I had starting getting friends in church who were virgins and grew up in church. And I could never fathom, I can't believe you're a virgin. Like, don't you have to test drive the car before you buy it? Like all these things that were so engraved in my brain my entire life. And I got to the point of, you know what? I'm just so genuinely curious. Like I have done dating the world's way my whole life. Let's try it God's way. I don't know what that is or what that looks like, but I'm genuinely so curious as to, it was like a game to me. Like, what is this going to do for me? And so I became obsessed. Like I have read every faith-based relationship, sex, dating book on the market. I've watched every sermon series on relationships and sex and dating. For a year, I was beyond, I have to figure out what is this way of dating that God talks about and why is it so good for us? And I just love, the Bible says above all else, guard your heart because for everything you do flows from it. And it just made me think of that, the me in college who, like I said, I'd lay down at night and I would be like, why aren't they picking me? Like, what's wrong with me? And it's my heart, even though as I'm as I'm having these one night stands, in the moment, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it really is. Like, it really was like wearing and tearing at my heart to the point where I just felt so unworthy of love, so unworthy of so many things. And it wasn't until I studied God's love and what his definition of love is that I began to actually love myself. And on that journey of that, as I began to love myself more, I began to see my worth and my value as a daughter of the King. And as I was doing that, I started to attract like better and better and better guys. And I was the first woman that my husband also had not had sex with. And so his story is honestly very similar to mine, which is so, so cool. But yeah, we decided to wait, and we talked about it. He brought it up the first date. Like, he so casually brought it up, and I was like, yeah, I'm waiting too. And it was just so like freeing, because there is that fear of like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to meet a Christian guy who wants to date me, let alone marry me, given like my past? And so there were so many fears that like I had to overcome and get over in that process. But yeah, that's just a little breakdown of my story.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing it. And
Of course.
hearing it. I just want to hug that college.
I know, it's sad.
I'm so sorry. But it's real. I mean, that's what we feel when we're into those areas. And to me, the most freeing thing about realizing that your relationship with God is in fact a relationship and not an obligation or a religion is when we venture into those type of conversations and we think, okay, if we're still becoming friends, and of course I didn't know you then, but you just telling me that, my heart goes out to you. One, because I can relate. Two, like, I don't want any woman having to feel that. So how much more so is our Creator, who knows us to be these, as you're saying, daughters of Christ, these beautiful creations, like giving, as the verse says, our pearls to swine. Like, how much more so does his heart long for us to be in a relationship that honors him, and not because we have to do everything right, and not because if you know God, then you're better than the girl you're going to the bar. It's not even that. It's just like he wants the best situation for you and the most glorifying relationships for you to interact with. So I hope that alone just speaks to someone of like, it's not missing the mark or how dare you do all this, but it's just like Nicole's saying, I love that you had that hunger to discover God's way, because his ways are higher than ours. They really are long-term, gratifying, loving ways. And I remember whenever Arden and I were going through premarital counseling, we had this wonderful Dominican couple who was just so vivacious, and I loved learning from them because it was, it was all Christ-centered, right? But it was very different. And they're just like, oh, you're gonna love each other, and marriage is amazing. And so they're really being beautiful. Okay? But in telling her my story, which is similar in some aspects to yours, she said, in all those moments, I'm not gonna try to do her accent again, but she said, those moments you were looking for love. We weren't, like when you come to this redeemed version of yourself and you're looking back on the past, to eradicate shame, you need to think through like, what was I looking for, and like what is going to be completely tethered from my past, my future, but also what is going to be synonymous. And that looking for love is constantly there. So someone listening and you think, well, why was I doing that? Or why am I doing that? Like, you're looking for love, but we're not necessarily looking in the right places. And you can make that switch initially. And that's why I love that you said that you and your husband both didn't come from a background that you were virgins, but you just have to cherish each other's purity in your dating and engagement to your marriage. So what did that look like, practically speaking, as much as you want to share? I know there's difficulty to that. Like, you've awakened love and you're choosing to cherish it, but you know what the fruit tastes like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What were the practical ways that y'all guarded that, and spiritual ways?
Practically, boundaries were number one of importance in our relationship. My husband, and I think for anyone listening, this is my opinion on why it's so important, if you're on a purity journey and you're wanting to wait until marriage, to date someone who not only is after the same like goal, but also like understands it and wants to wait with you, not for you, because there's a difference in waiting with and for. Because if someone is waiting for you, they're going to constantly be crossing the line of temptation. They're going to see how far is too far. And then they're not going to be the one stopping you. And I just genuinely believe it is the man's job to protect the purity and to lead in that area. And so I'm such a huge believer in that. I don't know if that's old school, but I just think like the men are called to lead. And of course, they're called to lead in purity because I'm not his wife until I'm his wife. And so he needs to be treating me as that. And so we had very strict boundaries that were honestly so annoying to me. And I'm just so thankful for my husband. We had an 11 p.m. curfew with hanging out. It would be, I say this so many times, it would be like 10:58, 10:59, and he's lacing up his shoes. And I'm like, seriously, I'm 29 years old. Like, we're adults. Like, you can stay and finish the movie. And he's like, nope, this is, like, he's the most disciplined man I've ever known in my entire life. And he truly says God had graced him for our relationship. But yeah, the boundary, and it doesn't have to be that extreme, but because our chemistry was like so intense and we both, again, have tasted the fruit, so we know. And so we were like, okay, well, let's just put this boundary in place. We tried not to hang out like alone in each other's bedrooms, especially late. Trying to think other boundaries. Definitely prayer. Like every time he would walk me to my car from his house, he's praying over us, praying over our purity, praying over our relationship. And really just protecting that purity in any way that God was speaking to him in that moment. And gosh, I like the wedding night, if you're waiting for any reason, like the memory, like the most vivid memory of my life is the car ride to the hotel on our wedding night. Like, I cannot wait to tell our kids, like, we, like, literally the excitement we felt, but also the, like, nervousness. It, like, felt like a newness. Like, we didn't know each other, but, like, we were married, like, just married.
There's, like, getting to it.
Yes. And, like, his friend who was, like, driving us, like, the car ride, oh, my gosh, it was just so cute and funny and all the emotions. And, yeah, just a giddiness and an excitement of, like, getting, like, we had crossed the finish line, like, not for us, but for God and to give him the glory. And I think also at the end of the day, like, my husband knew that the calling on my life was going to be in this area in some capacity. And so just protecting my purpose, protecting my calling, knowing that I wouldn't have authority to speak on this if we actually didn't wait. And so that was really, really huge for him. And I think it should be with any, man you're dating. I think it should be their job and mission to protect God's calling on your life. And I feel like I should just say too, like, it's before I met my husband, when I had started my purity journey, I think it was in like November of 2017 was when I was like, I'm going in on this. And then March of 2018, I felt like God asked me to start a women's group. Like, I hardly know God. I know no scripture. God's like, start a women's group on love, sex, and dating. And I was like, sure, whatever you say. Like, and I'm just prefacing every meeting with, I have no idea what I'm doing, but like, I just feel like I'm supposed to do it. And this group ended up lasting like 3 years every Thursday with like 40 people in my living room. Like, it was like awesome. Like, all these like amazing friendships were built. A couple months into this group, I go to Miami for a job, not the wrong people because I'm friends with them, but just a group of people that weren't walking the same walk as me and were very much in the mindset of like, have one night stands, have sex, And so, and I was such a new Christian, like, honestly, these friends didn't even really know this like new life I was living yet. And long story short, drank too much, had a one night stand. And the shame I felt, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm leading a women's group on this. Like, I messed up. And it was the first time I'd ever felt conviction with sex. Like, never have I experienced that before. And I think God allowed that to happen for me to know that feeling of like, no, this isn't what I have for you. And so my purity journey started then. So it was like March of 2018, got married in September of 2020. And I had to go and tell, my women's group that next meeting. I was like, hey, I messed up. Like, I slept with someone, like, as a leader of this group, like, I'm so sorry. And it was an opportunity for me to see the forgiveness of the women in the group, and also just like, we mess up and God still forgives us, and there's grace and there's always tomorrow, And so for anyone listening that maybe you stumbled, maybe you fell, like, you can still get back up and try again. Like, there's absolutely no shame in that. And God's with you in that and walking with you. And just to know that's the conviction is good. The conviction is from God. Any shame, anything like that is obviously just the enemy trying to get in your head and make you feel stupid and make you feel like you can't do this. And I promise you can. If I can do it, I really swear anyone on planet Earth can do it.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm cautious to preface that as well, is it's not just like allowance for like, and I'm putting words in your mouth, but Nicole's not saying, oh, well, it's okay, like keep messing up and like try again.
Exactly.
Right. It's an well, here's what I would say to that is like, what's the alternative if you have messed up? Like if we just stay behind, like God doesn't want that. He doesn't want you just okay, I messed up, and almost like the prodigal son, right? Like I'm just going to stay in this pig pie because it's what I deserve. I'm shameful. I'm no longer welcome. Like, there's always that re-welcoming, but like fully give it your heart as well. I love that you said like you experienced that shame and the sense of like, okay, well now I know that this isn't it. Because I remember like serving in the church and like still messing up. And my reality of what my relationship looked like, what my actual commitment to God in that moment, it was nowhere close to where it is today. So I say that like there's, of course I'm married now, so I definitely can't be messing up. I'm just into myself. I have a family and a baby, but just like with each step with God, like even if you step back, like continue to go forward because He is the prize. Like it's not a husband. It's not this check mark of, well, I've been pure for this long, so go me, right? But like seeing God as the prize and like He's what you go for. I fully believe that whole analogy of you can't just run from something, you have to run to something. So let that something be Christ.
So good.
His image. So thank you for sharing that and just for your vulnerability, because
Of course.
it is nuanced a little bit. And this, once you come from living in the world to trying to live, not trying, but living in the word, things that you, like the soul ties, even that alone, like you really have to continually tend to the ground. And I love that you said guard your heart, and your husband was guarding your heart. I fully believe that guys should be leading too. So
amen.
For sure. I mean, and even in dating, right? Because like you said, you're not his wife until you're his wife. And even if that you're dating someone that doesn't turn out to be your future husband, like purity is not just a gift you give to your husband. Like it's a way you live, and treat people around you. Like people are not objects. So that should be a good sign, first of all, if you're dating someone that's not honoring your purity. Yeah. They might be the one for you. What would you say to someone that's like, I'm kind of contemplating that, but we haven't had sex yet, and he says he respects it? What would be your gauge for them as like, hey, this is a no, and this is a, does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think it's so tough because, you know, I can't be the one to say like, you're supposed to be with this person or you're not supposed to be with this person. I do think like, follow the peace. Like I was dating a guy before my husband and he was a great Christian. We met in church. He was super sweet, again, great guy. And, but he was always like, he was waiting until marriage as well, which is funny, as was I, but he was always trying to cross the line. And one time, like we were literally just like hardcore making out. And I was like, oh, I feel like we should stop. And he was like, it's just making out. And like literally in that moment, my spirit was like, nope, no, like I'm uncomfortable. You made me feel uncomfortable by like diminishing how I felt given what we were doing. It kind of felt like it was escalating, and I didn't want to get to that line of like, now that there's too much temptation, you know? And I had ended things with him shortly after that, because again, I knew my purpose and my calling, and I knew that the man God had for me was going to lead me in that area, not walk me to the line of temptation in that area. And so for anyone listening who's seeing someone and says he'll wait with you and you want to wait, I would really just pray about it and ask God to reveal this man's heart and intentions for you. Is he willing to wait because it's something that his heart desires in his personal relationship with God? Because I don't think, if it's not their own personal conviction, I don't think it's going to last long. And so he could say it because you're in the honeymoon phase of first dating, and you know, that could last anywhere from 3 months to a year and a half. And then once that fades and now they change their mind and you're a year and a half emotionally invested in this relationship, it's going to be really hard to back off. And God is such a good God that if you pray and ask, for him to reveal certain things to you, he will. You just really have to be open to hearing them. And sometimes I always have to say this, but like if you're asking and asking and asking and you feel like God is silent, I always just say he probably already gave you the answer.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's like a hard, like gut check. It's like, okay, I know I need to end it. Um, that's okay too. I always say if you can love or like the wrong person that much, think of how much you'll love the person that God has for you and the ways that he'll lead you in your relationship, in your purity, in all the ways your heart really desires. And not just that you desire, but God desires for you. And so, yeah, I would first start with prayer and asking God to reveal his heart and his intentions with the man that you're seeing. And again, I do think if you ask, you will receive that answer.
That's so good. And I feel like if you're in that situation also too, from what I can remember, it's like if you are constantly looking for an approval, like, oh, is this the right one? Like,
Yeah.
friends like him, does this feel right? Like that anxiousness, to me, I lean towards thinking, okay, well, if that's a sense of not having peace, and like that
Mhm.
itself might be an answer for you. So we've set up this stage a little bit of how to come from not living in purity to embracing it,
Mhm.
or how that can happen. But I would love to also even showcase a little bit of like the why even more. So I mean, first and foremost, why is because God says so, and because he's a good God and it's for our own benefit. But diving a little deeper into that, because I think purity culture is really shocking,
Mhm.
or is really mystified right now, even in the church. Like it is so, I think we're in an interesting place with Christianity today because of social media, because of
Mhm.
intertwining with like fame and celebrity culture. And it can get really tricky, especially on this subject alone. Like I've had people ask me, and again, not to make any judgments of anyone out there, but it's hard. You are trying, especially as a baby Christian,
Yeah.
of okay, well, I see this, I read this in the word, but I see someone else living out that way. Like, what do I lean into? Or am I reading this wrong? Because I am still understanding what the word says and the depth of it. So um when we talk about purity culture, I think everyone's mind kind of goes to, okay, long skirts, no makeup,
Mhm.
no showing your belly button or your shoulders. Like that's not necessarily, I think it's more about
Oops, my shoulder's showing.
oops, did I see that? Like collarbone. Um, but it's, to me, it's more about heart posture. And I
Yeah.
hear that in the way that you're presenting it of like your husband chose you, he pursued you, he did things intentionally to set parameters. I'm sure he wasn't coming up to you like, hey, I'm going to leave at 10:59, and if you stop me, you're a wicked woman. Like it
Right.
was
Never.
realistic. But it was intentional.
Mhm.
And so everything you've been saying is like right on the mark, and I just want to like re-emphasize certain aspects so people really hear them. But I think it is shocking today, even as you said, because everything is so hypersexualized. And to me, in the season I'm in as a new mom, I'm learning so much that that's not even directly correlated to our physical body, but through our eyes and our heart. You know, like the Bible says, he who looks at a woman in a certain way,
Mhm.
not he who looks at a woman that is dressed inappropriately in a certain way, but like any woman.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm sometimes having to nurse my son in public. Guys, I'm covering myself, you know, I'm being modest, if you will. But I'm like, this act alone is beautiful. But how much of our sexualized culture even makes me think differently about that certain act, right? So I'm really painting a big picture here about what I'm trying to get at is the way we interact with other people and the way we do our day-to-day lives has become so altered over the last 10, 20, 100 years because of how prevalent culture has made sexualization. And in your own words, what has chasing and pursuing purity done in your life and in your marriage, even today, you know, past the honeymoon night, because you
Mhm.
chose to cultivate that intentionally with each other?
Yeah, it's so funny you talk about like, everything being over sexualized in today's culture and society. And something I've really had to work through, I mean, up until recently is because of my past with like, you know, I feel like my body shape has always been very over sexualized, and it's something I've always been so self-conscious about. And it's something that my husband has had to really, and that's another reason why I think that, purity was something deep down always in my heart. I feel like I was always seen by men for my body. And so I have had this weird insecurity about my body, almost like if I wear these jeans to church and like a t-shirt, my butt or my body, it looks really good in these jeans and it's going to draw attention, and then I'm making a man lust. And like this was like all this stuff going on in my brain, and my husband really had to like kind of break down, like, listen, God made your body. You're thinking it's over sexualized because of how you grew up and the lifestyle you lived for so long, but that's not reality. Like, that's your body that God gave you, and for the love of God, you can wear jeans. Like, and again, it goes back to the heart posture. Like, if someone is looking at someone in a certain way, that's not my problem. That's the heart posture of the person lusting. And so that for me, I don't know if that even made sense, but that's something I really had to work through within like that purity culture, and something honestly up until recently is something that I still catch myself like, oh, can I wear this, or oh, is this crop top appropriate? And it's like, what's my heart posture? I had someone comment something on a photo of my husband and I on our honeymoon, and the photo wrecked me for so long. And I was wearing like a white dress, and it was like a tight dress. And, my figure was like very obvious in the dress. And she commented and said, shame on you for telling people you waited until marriage for sex dressing like that. And it just like reinforced the insecurity of like, I basically need to be wearing a sack of potatoes all the time. Like that's a potato sack. That's how I need to dress.
He'll fill that outfit if you wore it, right?
No, I don't know. That's funny. My husband says that. Yeah. And so it was something that I was like, oh my gosh, like I caught myself trying to like defend myself. And it's just funny because that's how people think. They think that if you have an attractive couple and this woman who dresses a certain way, they must be having sex. And that's like the norm. And part of me was like, gosh, I get that because I used to think that way. And I've had to like retrain my brain. And honestly, I feel so blessed that I kind of get to understand the other side. For example, I had these two friends I went to high school with, and he was kind of the player. She was always in relationships, and they were both having sex. And in college, like all of a sudden he went to like Bible school, like out of high school. And we were like, what the heck? Like, what? And then they started dating, and then they were like going public about like, or not going public, but telling people that word got around that they were, saving themselves for marriage. I'll never forget. I think God allows me to like vividly remember how I felt to use it as, because it was going to be used in my future. I remember like thinking, who do they think they are? Like once you've had sex, you've had sex. There's no such thing as a born again virgin. Like that's ridiculous. And I actually reached out to them once I became a Christian, decided to like save myself, and like told them like, I applaud you guys for doing what you did and for telling people, because they didn't know at that time that story would literally be a part of essentially my story. And it's funny, I just got a DM on my Instagram, and they said, there's no such thing as a born again virgin. And I was like, and I just had to laugh because I once in my life said that. And I think it's so interesting how God will just use stuff from your past and bring it with you to your future, to be a part of your story and a part of your testimony, and just like planting seeds along the way. And yeah, I just think that, God is so, he's so good as a redeemer of our past and our stories. And I'm just so thankful. Honestly, my husband, if he wasn't leading me the way he was leading in our relationship, definitely wouldn't have been able to do it without him.
We'll just have to get him on here over the next.
I know.
Let him speak to all the guys out there. Yeah. And again, I wholeheartedly agree. The guy should be leading. And that doesn't mean we can't compliment it, and that we also, like, I totally, the guy has the vision for purity and the woman doesn't. It's the same bad scenario where it's just, you're not complimenting the same viewpoint, but even as he leads, like, you compliment it. You can pray for his tenacity in that area. You can,
Yeah.
like you said, choose to honor him in a way. It's I am a big fan of the short engagements as well.
Same.
Because like because you start envisioning that person as your spouse, like you think, oh, I can't wait to have kids with them. And then of course I'm not having kids with them. And that means we're gonna,
Mhm.
our chemistry is building. So it's like I think part of it also is like purity culture is having a real keen view of what you said earlier. Like they're not your husband until they're your husband. Like pray
Mhm.
for them in such a way that they are, honor them in such a way that they are, but don't like act like they are.
Yeah.
I love that you set boundaries as you did because we had to do some of the similar boundaries and even have friends that would call us at like that 11 p.m. mark, like, hey, I don't care
Mhm.
if it's still going. You need to get out of there.
Yeah.
Uh, because it is so casual today. Um, and I love that you even said that it was shocking to you watching other people do it. And now
Mhm.
you're experiencing that, you think, yeah, I get it. Because it is
Yes.
different. And it does require more of you. But
Yeah.
anyone that's listening, it's worth the endeavor and lean into the tension of that pull of knowing. Like it's hard because you're becoming different.
Yeah.
It's tough and it requires more of you because it's God's view for your life. So like lean
Yeah.
into strength in that area. I want to be really sensitive to anyone that feels like you were feeling like, am I ever going to meet a man that's one going to love me despite my circumstances?
Mhm.
Or I knew whenever I was choosing purity, I had friends look at me and say, you're never going to find a man that's saving himself.
Mm.
And if you don't see it or you hear things like that, it's really easy to believe. So as you were, I believe you said 20, late 20s when you
I was
discovered
29 when I met I was
you,
27 when I got saved and 29 when I met my husband.
yeah,
Or
what would you
26, 26.
26. So late 20s,
Mhm.
finding Christ, understanding purity. Can you just speak directly to that girl that's thinking, I'm a lost cause. I've been at this too long. Like, is it even worth pursuing purity? Or am I going to not get anything out of it? Like it's a prize, but like, is it
Yeah.
worth what's required of me?
Yes, and I think, for you had said just a moment ago that maybe someone's questioning like, I'm never going to find a man who's waiting as well. And so I just need to settle. Well, my husband, I don't think he thought he was going to wait until he met me. And I think that God opens when God introduces your husband to you and your husband finds you, I think that something clicks in them. And God, my husband always says like God graced me for this woman. Like she was the first woman I haven't slept with, the first woman I've pursued purity with, and God graced me for it because I knew she was my wife and I wanted to protect her in all ways that I could. And so if you're listening and you're like, never going to find a guy that is waiting, I think you're limiting God and putting God in a box when God is limitless. And God wants you to walk the purity journey as well. So of course, the man that He has for you is going to be pursuing the same thing. So just holding on to that and knowing that God is a good God and He knows the desires of your heart, and He's not going to introduce your husband to you and then be like, by the way, he's not waiting. Good luck. Like that's just not the God we serve. And so just having faith and patience, and also just in the meantime working on yourself. What are areas of how can you, what characteristics or what character traits do you maybe need to work on before He introduces your husband to you? I loved being single. Like I feel like I thrived and I'm such an independent person, but there were definitely areas of my life where I needed healing before I met my husband. And that's not to say I truly don't believe you're supposed to be fully healed by the time you meet your person. I think that the person God has for you stands by you and helps you heal in certain areas. But I do think there are certain character things that I needed to work on before meeting my husband. And so if you're in a waiting season, just focus on you, focus on your relationship with God, and just know and believe that God is definitely sending your person if marriage is something God has for you.
I think it's really neat that you even shared that your husband's that's the level he was at. Because I think when we pick our future spouse, before we've met them or not, we get to help unlock things within them. We get to help them heal, as you say. And we're always on that journey. Like you're single, you're dating, or you've been married for 20 plus years, you're empty nesting. Like that journey doesn't stop because sanctification does not end, I think, until we get to heaven. We're constantly trying to become more like Jesus and less like what we see around us. So again, allowing that, whatever stage you're in, if you did have a one night stand last night and somehow on this episode, I'm so glad you're here. And I invite you just to enter this walk, because his yoke is easy. And I know I'm saying that there is a real stride and practicalities to walking out purity, but I believe it's worth it. And I was even thinking of an analogy earlier just to share. And I was thinking of, like if you're hungry and you're wanting sustenance, like you're wanting something that's going to last, similar to how, like you said, we crave love and we desire love. Like I can go to McDonald's right now and get like a $1 burger. It'll technically be my dinner, be real food, but it's packaged as this. It's quick, it's easy, it's good. It's I'm loving it. They literally say I'm loving it. But then if I wanted like a steak, something that's really going to be like nourishing to my body, it's going to take a little bit longer. It's going to require more of me, but it's going to set me apart in my health and my nutrients and my energy. And you may be like, I don't even eat McDonald's or steak, so I'm a vegan, so this doesn't resonate. But what I'm trying to say, if you are listening, is like sometimes it is worth the extra effort to go for the thing that is lasting, that is real, that is provided to us, but we have to partner with. And I know to me is a good way to sum up purity. It's like a partnership with the vision that God has for you, the marriage he has for you.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, if you're listening and maybe you're not a Christian or you're just walking into that season, something that really helped me was, my past of dating toxic guys over and over and over again, that pattern. I was like, okay, well, let's try something else. So even if, I'm not waiting until marriage, which that ended up being my goal. When you're not sleeping with someone, you realize a lot quicker how much you have in common and how much you don't. You realize, do we actually like each other? Do we even have things in common? Because physical activity can be so blinding to so many other things. Like I dated a guy 3.5 years and our relationship started to go south around 2 years basically. And we kind of stuck it out. But by the time we weren't sleeping together anymore, we were also living together. So by the time we weren't sleeping together, we were having to communicate. And we realized we actually don't even like each other. Like we literally have nothing in common. We have completely different hobbies, completely different interests, completely different mindsets. And when I broke up with him, it was the easiest breakup of my life. I was like, don't you want to be with someone who you have things in common with, things like that you actually like them, you enjoy spending time with them? And so when I look at it that way, like I don't have to think for a second if my husband would ever do anything on a work trip or anything like that, or if we couldn't have sex for a long period of time, because I knew he could so easily wait a year and a half before sleeping with me and do it so well. And so saving yourself until marriage just builds so much trust in your partner that lasts literally a lifetime. And so, yeah, I always like to share that because I just think it's also just so powerful. And I even tell like my non-Christian friends, like, just do it. It makes sense. Like, it really is so healthy. Like, why do you want to be with someone who just wants to sleep with you? And that was just my experience. And so I'm just so passionate, even for, non-believers to kind of figure out what this journey of just like saving yourself for the person that has the right intentions with you.
Yeah. I love the way that you frame that out. It's almost like you're advocating, just try a juice cleanse. Like,
yeah,
it's how you don't feel better.
Yeah. That's funny.
Well, I feel like we've been able to scratch like the surface of I'm in the surface, but like I like to go deep, and I feel like you've been so vulnerable with us, so we scratched the lower level.
Yeah.
Still, we can talk about this for hours, but I want to thank you for sharing your testimony and guys, I hope that this connects with you if they want to connect with you directly more.
So my podcast is Dream Check Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, and then the Instagram is just Dream Check Podcast. And then on that account, you can also find my personal account, which I share more like relationship stuff. It's Nicole Marie Ivanov. I don't know if you'll type it out somewhere. My last name is confusing, but
And yeah, we'll put that all in the show notes so you can connect with her. And Nicole, I just thank you for coming on.
Of course.
I have to do another podcast because I love getting to know you over these recordings.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.